The USA section of the International College of Dentists decided to record visually not only the history but several leaders in our profession. This presentation is a potpourri of the Chronicles of Outstanding Leaders in Dentistry series, being produced by the Audiovisual History Committee.
Dr. Nelson W. Rupp, it's good to have you here for this part of the video series that we're doing with the International College of Dentists. As you know, we've been collecting on videotape for the outstanding leaders in dentistry, and so it's a real pleasure to welcome you here and get a chance to share some of your life with me and, of course, all of the viewers. I wonder if we could start maybe at the end and maybe work backwards. You're recently retired now from the National Bureau of Standards.
Right, yes. I retired September 1st of last year from the American Dental Association at the National Bureau of Standards. And it has been a pleasure to be retired because they let me go back and work, which is one of my life joys. People ask me what my hobby is, and I said it's dentistry, and so that's what they still let me come back to the Bureau.
Dr. Rupp, tell me about the position that you held right before you retired.
The position before I retired was as Chief Clinical Scientist for the work at the National Bureau of Standards, where we were testing materials in the aspect of the handling of those materials. How do we handle the material so that we get the physical properties that the manufacturer wanted or designed in his making of the products that we as dentists and our assistants put together. In fact, we complete the manufacture of that material in the patient's mouth. So we were working on the physical properties that make that material more durable than it might be if it's mishandled.
It seems as if that's an interesting arrangement. The National Bureau of Standards, of course, is a national agency, and yet part of that is the American Dental Association. How does all of that fit together?
Well, after World War I, the Department of Defense at that time, called the War Department, from the Army Dental Corps, received a request to be a specification for the purchase of dental materials. There would be a federal specification. And the first one they tackled was the alloy for dental amalgam, because the amalgam was the product that was used the most during the war, and they could not get a good alloy that would be predictably set and do the job that they thought ought to be done. And in fact, when the dentists would get the material, the patients would be the guinea pig because the dentist really didn't know what they had. So they asked for a specification, and when the specification was ultimately developed, the American Dental Association saw what a great boon that was to dentistry to have specifications, and they were invited by the Bureau to come help, and that was in 1928. The first ADA employee went to the Bureau to help in the development of the specifications.
So the American Dental Association then is really helping to support the National Bureau of Standards in terms of the testing of dental materials?
I would say yes to that. I think it's supporting, and it's a symbiotic relationship. They're working together. And in fact, it's evolved now where NIH is providing money to the ADA and to the National Bureau of Standards to help support this work, because of the things, the different developments that have come out have worked toward bettering the delivery of dental care, and they feel that it is not just something for the Department of Defense, it's not just something for the American Dental Association, but the American public, the ultimate user of the materials in their mouths, is really benefiting from the use of that material, of the work that's being done. In one of the things that you wrote, you did mention about
the fact that the survey methods were really valuable in terms of having an impact on programs. And I wonder if you could just sort of expand on and give some examples of how that's happened.
Well, it's difficult perhaps to get the idea of just what you're referring to there, but we feel that the survey methods have had an impact at so many different levels, in that so many times people have just borrowed from the highly industrialized countries methods of training, methods of services. For example, take my own country. We were looking after, at that time, Papua New Guinea, and in Australia the average 12-year-old child had 9 carious teeth. Mm-hmm. The average New Guinean child at 12 years of age in many parts of the country had less than 1 carious tooth, and even where the disease was higher, it was only around the level of 3 or maybe 4 carious teeth. So you had within that country already a range of situations, but totally different situations and different needs to the child in Australia.
I see.
And as you go around the world, you find many, many variations on that theme. So the impact was that very different approaches were required, even different methods of prevention.
Based upon the disease patterns that you were finding in the country.
That's right.
And now I will give you your quote.
Good.
Which says, and this comes from World Health Statistics Quarterly.
Yes.
The power of the information base in guiding global oral health has been the single most important factor in its undoubted success.
Right.
Well, that was...
Okay, well, I've given you, of course,
yes,
the background
right.
at the country level, but there is also, again, the global background. It was because of those methods and because we were able to aggregate them in the Global Oral Data Bank that we were first able to say, right back in 1973, look, disease is dropping in the highly industrialized countries. And you better look to the manpower production, you better look to the educational system, because this is happening, and it looks like it's going to keep on happening. And we were also able to say that in a number of developing countries, the disease was going up at the same time as it was coming down in the highly industrialized countries. So it was things like this that made such an important impact. We also developed a new system for measuring periodontal disease in partnership with the International Dental Federation. And that rather simple but very reliable method has also revolutionized our attitude to periodontal disease, where we've seen now the high levels of bleeding and calculus in the developing countries, and much lower levels in the industrialized countries where there is good oral hygiene. But we don't see the same differences in destructive periodontal disease. And as you know, in the old days, we all knew and we were all taught that if you didn't clean your teeth, you first of all got bleeding gums, then you got calculus, then you got pocketing, then you got deep pocketing, and finally your teeth got loose and fell out. We don't believe that anymore. It's not that sort of nice continuum that people had preached to us in those days. And it was because of the basic methods and this particular method that was developed for that situation that we've been able to see that some of our theories were not right on the spot.
Right. Earlier, there was an interview with Dr. Rupp, and he talked about dentistry 20 years from now, and he said, well, he didn't think it was going to change that much. What's your sense, Bill? Is dentistry 20 years from now going to continue through what appears to be some major transitions?
It's undergone such an enormous change in the past 20 years. I guess it's hard to foresee that we can change that much in the next 20, but I wouldn't hold my breath. My sense is that 20 years from now we'll have changed perhaps as much as we've changed in the past 20. Changes have just been enormous. But think of the things yet we really haven't solved. Much of what we do is very imperfect and is pretty subjective, and we do because we've always done it that way. Until a few years ago, we didn't have an awful lot of respect for the soft tissues in the mouth. We just sort of took care of the teeth, and we didn't worry about what surrounded them. But my word, in the last 10 to 15 years, of course, we've accomplished a great deal, and we're much more concerned about it, and I think do an infinitely better job. I remember my graduate training in terms of placing margins of restorations. With children particularly, it was to get them up underneath the gingival tissue as far as we could, because those teeth were going to continue to erupt and expose those margins eventually. And the damage that we did back in those days, just incredible. But the TMJ syndrome, the oral facial pain, occlusion, I think we have so far to go before we come close to solving that problem. The management of periodontal disease is for the few who, I guess, have the motivation and the perhaps resources to handle it. But we've got a lot to do yet, and I can't believe that we aren't going to make as big changes over these next few years as we made before, but I don't know what they're going to be. Clearly, implantology is going to be much more in favor than it was 5 or 10 years ago. But science is being used now instead of simply anecdotal information about patients. And we've finally got something to build on. But I don't think there's still enough science in dentistry. Sure, our students get courses in biostatistics, but it seems to me they forget an awful lot about that once they get out into practice and are hooked into many slick-talking salesmen and buy into the wrong things. But dentistry has got to be more and more science. I would think, over the next 10 years or so, perhaps many, maybe most dental offices will have computer terminals hooked into a mainframe someplace so that they can tap into it every morning and learn the latest on whatever there is out there. I think 20 years from now, it's going to be a lot different than it is.
One hears that there's a need to bring dentistry closer into the mainstream of healthcare delivery. I've heard talk about the concerns about the isolation of dentistry, that it tends to sit apart from the Health Sciences Center. What's your sense of that, Bill?
Well, I think the isolation is one of the major faults with the way the system works today. But I'm not quite sure how to correct it. Bringing it into hospitals, bringing dental practices into hospitals was pretty hot stuff, 15, 20 years ago? And we saw departments develop in some hospitals, particularly, I think, on the East Coast. Fewer, perhaps, as you move from the East to the Midwest to the far West. But this isolationism, this being alone and being out of the mainstream, I think it's devastating. I guess that's why we have dental meetings, so dentists can talk to each other. And it's one of the reasons, perhaps, that dental faculty don't like to go to dental meetings, because they're together all the time with somebody else, and they're working the new territories. They know pretty well what's going on. And to go to a dental meeting and listen to things that are pretty much what they've already heard, it's not real exciting. And I think that's one of the things that I have faulted myself and perhaps our faculty on. We have not been as good attenders as we should, and it's just a responsibility, it seems to me, being in dental education, to participate with that practicing community. Because where I grew up, one without the other isn't going to cut it. And dental practice by itself is really not going to make it. Dental education by itself is not really going to make it. The two have got to walk together, and walk together, it seems to me, just almost every step of the way. But with what's happening to hospitals today, with some of the crises in medicine and among physicians, and the growing discomfort, it seems to me, with cost containment, I'm not sure this is a good time for dentistry to be moving in that direction. I'm not quite sure what the solution to that one is. We'll ask you, will dentistry become a specialty of medicine someday? I don't know the answer to it. Should it be? I don't know the answer to it. I'm not sure. With what's happening in medicine today, maybe dentistry is a lot better being removed from it, at least for the time being. Medicine and nursing have basically split. And, I'll tell you, nurses out there are leaving the profession. There are many troubles getting enough applicants to nursing school these days. But physicians and nurses, 25 years ago, for whatever reasons, pretty much split apart. And I can see the same thing happening between dentistry and dental hygiene if we're not careful. There are a lot of political forces out there that would tend to keep pulling them apart. I think that'd be a tragedy.
Well, my interesting patient in North Africa was George Patton.
Right.
The general came in, and he was a great person. I mean, I enjoyed him very much. He wanted to have his teeth examined, which I did, and he needed an inlay. Well, as an orthodontist, I had made very few inlays in quite a while, but I made him a mesio-occlusal inlay on an upper right second molar. I can still see it. And so then when he was through, he said, "Captain, let me have your name, organization, and serial number." And I said, "Well, what are you going to do, preferred charges?" And he said, "No, when someone does something nice for me, I like to do the same for them." So then down from Supreme Headquarters came this commendation, which I cherish and have all the rest of my life.
Did he really carry a pair of pearl-handled pistols?
He most certainly did.
And what did you get to do?
Well, he came in, and I was using a modified orange crate for a desk, and he took his jacket off, and every general gets a belt, you know, with an insignia on the front of it. He wore his all the time, and he unhooked it, and he had 2 holsters and 2 pearl-handled guns. And I said, "These are the famous guns," and he kind of chuckled, and I said, "Do you mind if I heft them?" And he said, "No, of course not." So I did, and I said, "I've read about you and your Mexican border experience," and he got a big kick out of that. Yeah. So he was a grand guy. I mean, and then I might elongate that story a little bit and say that I then a friend of mine permaplaqued this commendation, and I had it on my wall of my private office, and a friend of mine from Boston happened to visit me, and he saw it, and he said, "Do you mind if I could have a copy of that?" He said, "I know Patton's son," and he said, "I know that he would love to have a copy of that." So I said, "No." So I made him one, and I sent it to him. So 2 weeks later, I got a set of 2-volume set of the Patton papers, autographed by Patton's son.
Wonderful.
Which I cherish that very much.
That's very important.
How do you feel dental schools will need to change then? I guess when we're sort of talking about, you know, bringing fewer dental students into schools, and yet at the same time we're seeing really dramatic changes in disease patterns and populations who require care.
We're changing. Curriculum modifications are going to, of course, have to happen. We're seeing an aging population that is retaining their teeth. We have seen a 60% reduction in dental decay due to our very successful water fluoridation program in this country, even though 50% of the communities throughout the country are non-fluoridated, which means that you have vast areas in our country that still have decay patterns that were similar to those that we were seeing in the 50s before we realized that a small amount of fluoride in the water would have a significant effect on prevention. We are seeing I think we're going to see a reduction in the number of specialty trained dentists. Students will be opting for general practice residencies where they can get a broader and more in-depth clinical experience, which will give them a variety of treatment modalities and experiences so that they can treat the aging patient and the emerging understandings and changes that occur in these patients that in the past we focused very little on. In fact, much of it, we focused heavily on the child, we focused heavily on the adult patient, but after, say, 40, we just applied information that we knew to the adult population to an emerging whole new group of people. So we do have some challenges in that area. We've got some other things that are coming up, such as implants. We are advancing in implantology, such as we understand more about bone metabolism and how interfacing of artificial materials with the natural bone substances. We have newer materials such as sealants that are also augmenting the ability to prevent the progress of decay on teeth. We are concerned about root caries as the aging population maintains teeth, and as the gingival line recesses as a passive kind of eruption of teeth with the attrition on the surfaces of teeth. And we're seeing a whole new addressment to prevention in its broadest aspects. Not only what the dentist does to the patient to prevent, but the patient's ability to prevent disease by better oral hygiene, better care, modification of eating patterns, and just a general concern for wellness concepts that are developing in the U.S.
Yeah. You're talking now about tomorrow's dentist, and it says, but he must also assume a leadership role in shaping the laws and practices of his country and community to assure that comprehensive quality care is available to all, and especially the needy. A doctor who is politically informed, civically active, community-oriented, and socially conscious. I wonder if that's another whole role for dentists that we don't usually talk about.
Right, and our curriculum is not geared to making a student politically aware and an activist, but we have seen a need to provide information and a stimulus to our graduates as they have gone out into the communities where they live throughout the country and throughout the world, and they've had to assume leadership roles, and really that's one thing that we have not deans of dental schools have really not addressed. But we do know that our graduates have to assume those responsibilities because we see them across the country and throughout the world. And I think that who else can better champion the health and well-being of the population that you serve than those individuals that understand the disease trends and changes and needs and how services are delivered and the availability of care and the cost of care and the need, the patient acceptability for certain kinds of delivery systems.
When I started dentistry at Orange, I worked 3 nights a week and Saturday up till 2 o'clock and thought it was normal. And it didn't fuss me. I still had time to live and enjoy life. Right. And it worries me a little bit when I see the attitude of some of the young fellows that feel that the world owes them a living. And we see after the World War just what happens to countries for a number of years where everybody in the country feels the world owes them a living. Right. And I don't denigrate the youth of today at all. I think the youth today has great prospects. But I do denigrate some of the leadership that some of the members of our profession are giving. And of course, I'm very upset about government and some of the people who are in government who have got an idea that if you can dampen down the enthusiasm of the individual a little bit, don't make him learn quite so much. Bring somebody along who doesn't know all that, so they don't want to be paid for what they don't know, and the public will get a cheaper service, and that's exactly what they will get. They'll get a cheaper service, but it won't be a service at all. Right. And I can see, not only in more than one country, I can see this happening all around the English-speaking world. I can't speak for the others because I can't communicate with them. But I can see where, for the sake of money, that you get such a stupid suggestion by a politician, as they have at the moment in New Zealand, where they deregulate dentistry. And the fellow that sells me a paper could set himself up as a dentist as long as he didn't give anybody an injection and as long as he doesn't call himself a dentist. Oh. Now that's what they're trying to work to, and these people are stupid enough to think that that's good for the community. Mm. Now, so it's not coming from the profession, it's being heaped on the profession by people, do-gooders, who think that by reducing standards, not requiring people to know so much, that you will open up the gates for competition, and competition always leads to something bigger, brighter and cheaper, not necessarily better. And I blame our own administrators in dentistry for not seeing clearly enough what was happening and raising voices loud and clear and demonstrating what could happen if this thing is proceeded with. I know full well that the Australian Dental Association, the New Zealand Dental Association, the American Dental Association, the FDI have all bought into this argument in New Zealand. I know that. But when were they bought into it? When the ink was nearly dried on the bill.
Too late.
And there should have been, not now, but there should have been, before it got to this stage, a tremendous campaign from the people themselves demanding that they get a better service than what the government's trying to give them. Then I'm very, very concerned about the attitude of some of our young academics who feel that their spiritual home is with medicine rather than with dentistry. And you may or may not know it, but at the moment in Melbourne, Adelaide and Perth in Western Australia, there is every possibility that they will lose their faculties of dentistry, and the faculties of dentistry will become departments of the Faculty of Medicine. Now that's what we had 50 years ago. And if we haven't learnt enough in 50 years, I wonder what's wrong with a young professional man that allow himself to have his profession so denigrated that he becomes a handmaiden to a medico. You've only got to read the press and see what the public estimation is of medicine and dentistry, and it's far much, the dentistry stands far higher in the applaud and acceptance by the public than does medicine at the moment, because they're very unhappy about noises that the medicos are being made for extra money and extra this and extra that, and we haven't been condemned quite the same degree as that. But to willingly submit to losing a faculty, of course you could argue this all day, and of course what I've said is purely superficial, but it is only an attempt to make a short statement which has very deep depths involved with the thing, and it's got to be argued out. But the thing that annoys me is that there are not enough people standing up and screaming about it.
That's what we find here. And
we've got a lot of dry-fingered dentists. Do you use that term?
We use it wet-fingered and dry-fingered, you bet.
We've got a lot of dry-fingered dentists who've made me very annoyed over the years. As a prosthodontist, I have seen the time developing when there was a greater need for prosthodontic excellence than there's ever needed to be in modern man. People are living longer. If you live longer, you've got to be able to chew longer to live longer.
Right.
Therefore, the problems of treating the geriatric patient are so great that you need a greater amount of expertise than you did when the patient didn't live quite so long and the tissues were more adaptable to the use of the presence of foreign bodies in the oral cavity. But then in Melbourne, they even haven't filled the chair of prosthetic dentistry. They've just lumped it in with conservative dentistry. So they haven't got anybody who can really speak on behalf of prosthetic dentistry.